So, what is shadow integration? What is shadow integration? Wow, that's kind of a big topic. There's a whole subsection of therapy and psychotherapy and psychiatry and psychology to do with shadow integration work. So it's huge. But simplified, shadow integration is the integration of the parts of our psyches and our personality structures that have been repressed, denied, blocked, or pushed away. And what happens when we deny something in ourselves that actually is a part of ourselves is it kind of goes underground. So it becomes darker and it gets pushed to the back of the psyche. And shadow integration work is the reverse of that. It's like delving down into the shadow, finding the lost, damaged, unintegrated parts of your psyche, and then very slowly and gradually bringing them back into the light of consciousness one by one, re-owning them, and then finding a way to reintegrate them into your personality as a whole. It's powerful. It's deeply, deeply transformative, and it's certainly the most challenging therapeutic work you can do. And it's the most healing because of that. So I've worked with many clients who have said they've wanted to heal themselves of some physical ailment, some kind of emotional ailment, some kind of psychological mental ailment. And invariably, at some point, we reach a roadblock where it's like, oh, here's a piece of your shadow that needs to be reintegrated that's central to whatever illness and discomfort they're experiencing. And then we get to do some shadow integration work. My process for identifying what part of the shadow needs to be worked on and identified and transformed and healed is to follow the process outlined by Carl Jung. Carl Jung talks about how it's not a good idea to like jump into your psyche and your personal unconscious and your personal shadow. He said the best way to do this is to ask for what part of your shadow is most important to have integrated. So you're allowing your psyche to choose what shadow material is presented. And he quite rightly, Carl Jung said, your psyche has an innate desire and urge and need to heal and to integrate. So you just have to follow the process presented that you're being presented with. And so that's what I do. So when people come to see me and work with me, I allow their psyches to show us the work that needs to be done. I don't make that decision. Sometimes the client will make some suggestions, but I still tend to follow their psyche rather than what they think they should be doing. Sometimes they'll say, I think I should be working on this. And then their unconscious will say, no, 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 we need to be working on that over there. What is the advantage of using astrology in therapy and shadow integration? Fabulous question. Astrology gives me a picture of the person's psyche. So I understand and know in advance of who I'm working with, even though I've just met the person. So someone can just show up and they're like, oh, I want to do some shadow integration work, or I've got this problem, or I've got this challenging situation, or I've got this desire or this need. And before we start working with each other, I can look at the astrological chart and I can see who they are on a conscious personality level. And I can see the main patterns they have in their conscious self and their unconscious self. And I can also predict a lot of what the shadow integration work will be. I'll be able to identify the main areas, not the details, but the main areas of their unintegrated shadow. So it gives me all that information before I even do a session with the person. So I have all this picture, a very accurate picture of the structure of the person's psyche and a map of their karma in this lifetime. And that's how come I can get down to nuts and bolts very quickly. So we don't waste any time on irrelevant stuff. I don't need to spend, 10 sessions getting to know the person, which I would otherwise have to do. If I didn't have the astrological map, I'd have to spend 5 or 10 sessions just getting to know the person, finding out what their strengths and their weaknesses are, finding out what their shadow material is, and finding out a lot about them. And astrology obviates the need to do any of that. It's just like I've got the person's structure of their psyche right in front of me, and we can get straight to business. Saturn symbolizes our personal shadow. And at another level, but at this is a completely deeper level, it also begins to symbolize how that person will interact with the collective shadow. But we'll put that to one side for the moment. So Saturn symbolizes that person's individual shadow, and it shows the most likely ways, to me, as an astrologer, it shows the most likely ways that they have acted that out. So I can make some very accurate, educated guesses about how their shadow is manifesting in the world, what kind of challenges they've been presented with in the world, and basically how they've mismanaged their life from the point of view of, that's part of their shadow. And that gives me also a roadmap of how to show them to start working with their shadow skillfully so that they can reverse that process and start reintegrating their unintegrated shadow material. So Saturn is a key planet in the birth chart, and it shows me the structure and nature of their personal shadow and how to go about working with them. There's 3 things I look at with Saturn: the sign position, the house position, and the aspects. So the house position shows, well, the sign position shows how Saturn works internally. So the sign doesn't get acted out so much externally and with other people. It's much more of how the person is creating their own personal shadow more internally. But the house is how they act that stuff out in the world. So if Saturn is in the first house, the person is going to be experiencing some kind of fear to do with expressing their will, acting in the world, meeting their needs, expressing their essential self, and enacting their willpower out in the world. Second house, if Saturn is in the second house, the person's going to have some kind of fear around the integrity and well-being and health of their physical body. So if they've got something going on in their psyche to do with their shadow, it will there's a stronger tendency for that to be acted out through their physical body. Saturn in the third house is Gemini and all to do with your intelligence. My father had his Saturn in the third house, and he always felt inferior to other people intellectually. He wasn't, but he always felt like he was. And so he always thought other people were cleverer, more knowledgeable, more highly educated, more sophisticated. And that wasn't actually true, but that was how he felt. Saturn in the fourth house, which is what I've got, is nearly always the person has some kind of like drawbacks or mishaps, or they're not given what they need in terms of their emotional development as a young child. And so they usually have some degree of problems, challenges, difficulties, unintegrated stuff left over from their childhood, and so on. All the other houses go around. So it touches a different area and arena in the person's life. Back to Carl Jung, I used to use dreams a lot. So once someone starts working on their shadow, they will almost invariably within weeks or months start having dreams about their shadow material. And those dreams are usually quite key and crucial. So when I'm doing long-term integration, shadow integration work with a client, I'll get them to record their dreams, and then we can look at them. And sometimes doing Gestalt two-chair work with figures or elements or images from the dream can be very powerful and potent. The meditation practices I teach are superb. There's two that I rely on, which are both Buddhist. One is the one you mentioned, the metta practice, the metta bhavana. That is fabulous. If you've got anything in your shadow to do with your emotional body, the metta practice is just beautiful and priceless and very powerful. And likewise, the other meditation practice is the mindfulness of breathing, which is a practice of developing awareness of your physical body, emotional body, mental body, and spiritual body. And if you have Saturn in a fire sign or an air sign, because that's a yang practice, that's very useful for dealing with that Saturn position. So those are two meditation practices I teach. Probably my website, francisayley.com. So that's FRANCISAYLEY.com. I like to talk to people before they work with me, because some people are absolutely my perfect clients, and they're at the right place in their lives to work with me. Other people, not so much. I might recommend they work with someone else, because if they're not ready to undertake doing deep, potent, powerful, challenging shadow integration work, then they might want someone who's a little bit more gentle. Sometimes I can be very direct and blunt and confrontational. I don't let my clients get away with much. It's like when shadow stuff comes up, I confront them with it. And if they're ready to work with that stuff, that's great. And if they're not, or they shy away from it, then they're kind of wasting their time and energy and money with me. They need to go to someone who's a little more gentle and sympathetic and understanding. I can be very direct and blunt.